welcome to the GPP Hail Mary podcast on Big Italy 42. Here talking about some top GPP plays for NFL Week 7, courtesy of Josh Shepardson at BChad50. And starting off here, obviously in your GPPs, you want to get guys that are, 20%, 10%, 5%, as low owned as possible. You get one of those guys, or a few of those guys that go off, that's what's going to really set you apart in a tournament. Starting off here with Andrew Luck, a guy who starting to get more love as the week goes on, but a guy that should still be fairly low owned. As Josh mentions here, he's not saying he's going to be fading Palmer and Rivers on all the GPP rosters, but he likes Luck as a swerve, and I completely agree with that. Did throw the ball 50 times against the Patriots, and his shoulder looks fine, and ended up with over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns there, facing the Saints, allowing the second most fantasy points a game to quarterbacks. 7.7 yards per attempt, which is the second highest. So this is a team that does not force turnovers either. 2 interceptions on the season. This is a pass-first offense, and as we know, Andrew Luck has massive upside. Next up, one of my favorite players at any position, Brian Hoyer, and he's cheap too. He's $5,300 on DraftKings here. He says his inclusion is a product of him playing well, and also just so happens to be that he has the most productive wide receiver in all of football, and DeAndre Hopkins. Hoyer has just 2 interceptions, 8 touchdown passes in 4 games, 8.2 yards per pass attempt. And it's great because the Dolphins do give up 7 yards per pass attempt. And the Dolphins looked better last week, but that was one game, and it was against a banged-up Marcus Mariota as well. And Hoyer, very, very cheap, and also a guy who was very low owned in the Thursday contest, just about 4%. So that's definitely some big upside. And we know that Hopkins is going to be fairly popular, so if you get some Hoyer in there with him, then you're in a pretty good spot there as well. Todd Gurley, next up, GPP play. This is not a low-owned GPP play, but this is one you need to have exposure to because, as Josh points, he says it would be disingenuous of him to pretend like he's fading him on all of his on any of the rosters. It's just not going to happen. This is one of the spots where I wouldn't blame you. Josh obviously wouldn't either if you just go ahead and slot this guy in most of, if not all of your lineups. The Browns are allowing 5 yards per carry. Gurley's averaging 5.7. The Browns are the worst run defense in football, and it's been that way for a few years. Gurley, a guy that's getting carries even when his team's behind. I mean, his workload is absolutely locked in. You're going to see 20-plus touches with him and for the foreseeable future. Had 30 carries last week, so this is a guy with huge upside and a phenomenal matchup, especially at his DraftKings price. You got to love him. Latavius Murray is up next. Only defense allowing more yards per carry than the Browns is the Chargers at 5.4 yards per carry, allowing the second most fantasy points to running backs. And while Murray got out of the gates fast, he has only had one game with 20-plus carries and 15 times or less in 4 of 5, but 3 or more passes in 5 games. So it's a guy that this kind of makes him more of a GPP play because his usage has not been consistent. But we do know he has huge ceiling, big-time upside, and like we said, it's a very good matchup. And this is quite possibly, when you look at advanced metrics, this is quite possibly the worst overall defense in all of football in San Diego. So huge, huge upside there for Lat Murray. Next up, T.Y. Hilton. The Saints have not been great, or not been terrible against wide receivers, but it's a bad secondary that's been beaten like a drum, as Josh puts it here. And Dante Moncrief makes it seem like T.Y. Hilton is no longer the top pass catcher, but that's a misconception. He still is. Leads the team in receptions at 33, targets at 59, 10 more than Moncrief, and 456 receiving yards. And the only thing that's bad is the 1 touchdown grab, but he has 5 or more in every other season in the NFL, so he's a guy who certainly has big upside. And as Josh says, he was less than 10% owned on the Thursday contest, and also you need to just make sure, he did miss some practice this week, so make sure he's in before you lock him into your lineups there. Next up, one of my favorite GPP plays, and a guy that I think is a borderline cash play at his price, Michael Floyd. And we know John Brown is less than 100%, had some hamstring issues this week as well. But even with Brown playing last week, Floyd had himself a good game, had a touchdown, nearly had a second and a third. And Floyd got off to a really slow start, but he had broken and dislocated fingers. So for a wide receiver, it's hard to get off to a good start that way. Last 3 weeks, he has sandwiched 5 catch performances around a 1 reception dud. But the 2 games he had 5 catches, 59 and 50 yards, touchdown last game. He's a big target, 6'2", 220 pounds, monster red zone target. And we know he has big-time upside. And as Josh points out here, he had over 100 yards 3 times in 2014, with a different quarterback in each game. So this is a guy that can produce at any time with anyone under center. Obviously Palmer, no longer injured under center now, and it's going to be a popular play this week. But if you want to swerve off the popular plays, Michael Floyd makes a lot of sense there. Dorial Green-Beckham, a guy that's not getting a whole lot of love, but he probably should. And Harry Douglas is already out this week, so DGB is going to get more offensive snaps. Only played 9 snaps week 1. Josh mentions he got more and more involved in the offense. Had 29 snaps last week. 6'5", 225. Mettenberger is going to get the start for Mariota. This is the type of guy who loves to air the ball out, and DGB is a huge, huge target. Caught 3 for 57 on 6 targets last week. He does have 2 touchdowns this week. So Titans are a 6-point underdog at a 46.5 point total, which is one of the higher totals in the week. And he's less than 1% owned in some Thursday contests. So he's not a guy that you want a ton of exposure to, but he's a guy you certainly want to throw in there a little bit as well. Ladarius Green, and this one, ownership is going to be based on the status of Antonio Gates, who has now missed practice more than once this week. I believe it's 3 times now. And he's not looking like he's in great shape to play. If he does play, Green makes for an even lower owned GPP play. If he does play, Green still makes for a nice cheap play in GPPs because people won't be coming off Gates necessarily for him. So this is a good matchup, though, against Oakland, who has just been gashed by tight ends this season, allowing almost 80 yards per game. And it's not a sneaky play necessarily, especially if Gates is out, but he's certainly a guy that has the ability to find the end zone. He's a good red zone target and did score a touchdown last week as well. So once in parts of this San Diego offense, looks like the tight ends may be a good way to go here. And, Philip Rivers coming off that 500 passing yard game, certainly some big-time upside. And you got to feel good about the potential with some of these guys here as well. So that'll wrap things up. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out the rest of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.